Where did your real head go?
It's Halloween, and we're all entitled to one good scare. But between 1978 and 2023, we had 13 of them. Whether they're all good or not, we're going to find out. Now, viewers of this channel might be aware that I did produce a tier list of the Halloween franchise in the channel's early life. Now, a tier list doesn't really represent the ranking order of these movies. You can have 2 movies in the top tier, 3 in the one below it, 4 at the bottom tier. It doesn't tell you the order. Today I'm going to go through my order, my opinion on the rankings of these movies, right from the very first one to the very last one. I got candles going, I've got a lovely scent in the air, the autumn leaves are blowing around with wind and rain and black clouds outside, but nevertheless, this is going to be fun. I love the Halloween franchise. It isn't my favourite franchise, but my partner and I share different likes. I'm a Freddy fan, she's a Michael fan, but I still have a big opinion on this franchise bore out of John Carpenter's 1978 masterpiece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the worst and make my way to the best, because nobody wants to end on a miserable note, of course. And if you enjoy this video and you like what you see, please drop me a subscribe below and hit that notification bell for more updates on future videos. Your support means the world to me and is pushing me towards a life that is long overdue. I also want to hear your rankings. I want to hear your opinions on these movies. Please drop them in the comments below. Tell me what you think of my list and tell me what your list is, which is very likely going to be different. Likes and shares appreciated. It's time to go to number 13 in the list. Oh, it's going to be hard. Number 13 is Halloween Resurrection. I'm going to refer to my tier list a little in this because I don't want to feel like I'm just completely repeating myself. I want to make reference to what I've said before. Halloween Resurrection is my absolute least favourite movie of this franchise. It's also one of my most hated movies of all time. Like I said before, I don't hate many movies. They have to disrespect what's been before and ruin hard work to make me feel a personal loathing of it. I think there's 3, possibly 4 that I really, really detest. There's hating a movie, and then there's get this the f*** out of my life. Halloween Resurrection to me just destroys all the good work that's been done before. It is a complete cash grab. The treatment of Jamie Lee Curtis's character is absolutely abhorrent. I'm aware that there were reasons behind this, that she was contractually obliged to do this movie, but it shouldn't have existed in the first place. I will go on to the movie that it destroys a little bit later on. Trying to drag Halloween into this modern world of reality television, fame-seeking, internet-based dross is one of the all-time worst decisions of this franchise, and in any franchise for that matter. It's one of the worst decisions in horror. This movie cost around 13 million, and it frustrates me that it exists because there's nothing wrong with the Michael Myers depiction. Brad Lorry does a reasonable enough job as Michael Myers, and I know I've watched a few of his interviews online, and he's very entertaining. He seems like a really great guy, and he did his best to make Myers what he is supposed to be, but he is essentially made into a joke throughout.
Huh? You don't get it? You don't get it? So you want to be on Dangertainment?
I read on Collider.com that the irony that this movie is called Resurrection when it is so f***ing lifeless. Just generic kills, idiotic characters. It upsets me that Ryan Merriman's in this because I'm a big fan of his, and I can guarantee you there will never be another day where I watch Busta Rhymes kung fu kicking Michael and making a moron of him before then giving us this juvenile speech at the conclusion of the movie which could have been recited by a 10-year-old.
Michael Myers is a killer shot. Baggy ass overalls.
I just hate this movie. I will never like it. The only thing it has going for it is the look of the Myers house, maybe the eroded look of the Myers house over time. That's quite nice. I think it was done with models. I may be wrong. Please drop it in the comments if I am. But that's the only thing. There is nothing about this movie that I will ever want to watch again. It's a horrible cash grab and a pretty poor time for horror. Coming in at number 12 is going to be Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie. There are a lot of people out there on YouTube that have very similar rankings to this, so I don't want this to be something you've heard before. But with Halloween, I think it's unanimous with some of these entries that they're going to be in the position they're in. There might be the odd swap here and there, but there does seem to be a consistency. When I did the tier list last Halloween, I invited Amy Horror to come on and talk about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 because she has the same feeling towards that as I have to Resurrection.
I hate Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie.
I read somewhere that there's a way to not dislike this movie as much by ridding yourself of the idea that you're watching a Halloween film. I could understand that in a way, and I will talk about something similar further on in this list. But you can tell that Zombie really doesn't want to be making this movie. I know he was free from the restraints of creating a remake so he could pour more of his own stuff into it. It's obviously gratuitous. I'm not a big Rob Zombie fan when it comes to movies. I think he shoots them beautifully. I think they look amazing. Myself and Amy have talked endlessly about just how visually talented he is, but unfortunately his script writing is absolutely abysmal in my opinion. He makes normal characters filthy and revolting. Just the two ambulance drivers at the beginning talking about necrophilia and I mean, what is going on there? These are normal guys. You don't need to turn everyone into a ghoul. And of course, Michael in it is just not recognizable as Michael. He's lost half his mask. He's making sounds. He speaks very briefly, but he still speaks. They absolutely tear Dr. Loomis to shreds in this. I was never a fan of Malcolm McDowell's portrayal of Loomis anyway. However much I do like Malcolm McDowell as an actor, he did not suit this at all. You can't follow in the footsteps of Donald Pleasance anyway, but I don't think the effort was really there, and I don't think I found any connection to the two Loomises, and in particular this one. He is the lowest of the low. He is cashing in on all the misery caused by Michael, and unfortunately there's barely any characters you can really relate to. I will give Brad Dourif credit for a fabulous performance during the death of his daughter, and of course it was nice to see Danielle Harris again, but I would rather have seen her in a different situation than what we saw her here, certainly in a different movie. The White Horse thing was very strange as well. There's dream sequences, and this isn't a Halloween movie for me, and I can understand why Amy Horror feels the way she does about it. I know this movie has its fans, but again, if you watch it not as a Halloween movie, it might do it for you, but Rob Zombie's movies just don't do it for me. Now, having said that, you may be surprised at my number 11. It is not Rob Zombie's first Halloween. It is Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. I said before that I really hate movies when they disrespect what's been before or they ruin hard work. I think this one is bordering on it. If you're going to be technical about it, it's so somnambulant. There's nothing really interesting about it throughout. It's quite boring, really, in many aspects. And the kills are very uninspiring. I think there was one in the garage which I thought was great with the hook implement in the forehead. That was very impressive. But other than that, this movie doesn't do anything for the franchise at all. In fact, it probably sabotages it. Again, I'll go into what's either side of it. Jamie Lloyd's character is utterly ruined from the very moment this starts. She is mute. She is unable to communicate with anybody, especially when we see how the previous one ended. They had so much potential, and to do that was unforgivable in my opinion. They killed off probably the best character in the previous one in Rachel in a very uninspiring way. I believe the actress didn't want the original idea, which was to have the scissors plunged down her throat. I don't know about you guys, but if I was going to be unceremoniously dumped out of a movie that I was very important to, and also that I was garnering a great deal of popularity from, I'd want the most devastating kill imaginable, so I can't understand why she vetoed that. But nobody misses her when she's gone. There's no real talk of it. It's a real downer. I can't stand it when they kill off a really, really great character right at the start. Obviously, Resurrection did it. And I am also looking at you, Scream 3. But then to replace her with Tina is another shocking decision, and all the frustration that Halloween fans have with that character is completely justified. They do not do her any favours with the way she acts, the way she speaks, the shrill, high-pitched voice throughout, and why she's so close to Jamie Lloyd, I do not know. Daniela Harris is a wonderful actress and could have done so much more in this movie, given a proper script and a good story to work with. I think they rushed this. I think it came so quickly off the back of the previous. They just did not put any thought into it. And I said that Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 made Dr. Loomis look bad. He doesn't look much better in this one. Donald Pleasance has to give a performance, which apparently I don't think he liked either, from what I have read, that is very unpleasant, very unlikable, and the way he uses Jamie to try and get to Michael is just not becoming of him. He is supposed to be there to care for people and to try and protect them, and he ends up being a bit of an asshole in this.
Catch the little girl.
And I've not even mentioned the absolutely ridiculous whistles and cartoon sound effects you get with the police walking out of the house.
All clear. Nothing above, nothing below.
Whoever put that over the top, I hope you were able to tell your story in a circle. It's a terrible cliffhanger as well. Feels tacked on. I've left the worst till last. The mask. I will talk later about another unpopular mask, but I feel this cannot get away with using a completely different mask despite being a continuation of the previous movie. Suddenly Michael's mask morphs into a different one as he's floating down the river, and we get left with this image of almost a different killer altogether. Inexcusable, don't understand the movie. Amy Horror has sentimental value with this movie, as I have with Freddy's Dead. As a movie on a whole and an entry in this franchise, it's absolutely down there. Okay, now at number 10, I'm going to go with Halloween by Rob Zombie from 2007. This one's divisive. I think a lot of people either have a solid opinion on it or they've warmed to it over time. I've never really changed my opinion from the first time I watched it. The only thing that maybe I changed was actually in a negative sense, is that I initially was interested in them exploring a backstory when I first went to the cinema to watch it, and then when I came out about an hour later I was like, I didn't want that backstory, that shouldn't be there. So it was very quick. I get why they wanted to bring in Rob Zombie, he's like the grindhouse master, and I understand that the only way that they could really make something a little bit more original was to try and explore something different, which ends up being the backstory of Michael. But you are creating something that isn't there. The beginning of Halloween in 1978 is a young boy who has good parents, lives in a nice home, and there is no reason for him to be the way he is. He was just born bad. This creates a completely different person to me. I don't want to see Michael being emotional, crying in the arms of his doctor. And I particularly don't need to see the white trash, viciously vile dialogue that Zombie is so accustomed to being thrown in my face at the start of this movie at the breakfast table. Is probably one of the worst scenes in this franchise.
Man, that bitch got herself a nice little dumper.
I get that that's his style, and I get it might be great to others, and some people might really, really like Zombie's dialogue and his script writing and the way he is balls to the wall and he is very unflinching. It just doesn't do it for me. It makes me feel queasy and not in a good way. You know, I guess we like different kinds of horror. I am more subtle with my horror maybe, but it doesn't feel like Halloween. You know, some points in the movie there are good ideas. The mask is quite nice. As a reimagining of the original mask, it's quite good. It looks particularly unsettling when the small child has it on his head. It's like a huge version sort of perched on the head of this seemingly innocent child. That was quite a nice visual. Again, the visuals are fantastic from Zombie. The house looks wonderful at night. But again, I just don't feel like this is Halloween. Tyler Mane as Michael Myers is a hulking 7-foot beast. As good as that is for a horror killer, you know, the likes of Kane Hodder have done that very, very well. I mean, Tyler Mane could have probably played Victor Crowley beautifully, but it just doesn't fit Michael Myers. Michael Myers was a normal man with absolute evil in his soul and black in his eyes. He was not a powerful giant. You almost thought that Michael in the earlier movies got his powers from the evil driving him. In this, it's just because he's a huge bastard. And then, of course, the second half of the movie, when they kind of recreate the Halloween night, it feels rushed and it just feels like a more violent, gratuitous version of the original. So where I think the ideas are admirable, and again, I think the idea to put Malcolm McDowell in to play Loomis was good on paper. I don't think it transferred that well to screen. The ideas were there, I just don't think it's that great, and I wouldn't watch it again. Number 9 on this list is going to be Halloween Kills This movie lives up to its name. It has kills, and a lot of them. And if that's what you want from your Halloween movies, this is going to be right up at the top for you. I need a little bit more from my Halloween movie because I love the story and I love the character of Michael and I love the character of Laurie Strode. And I just felt this movie was a little jumbled and a little mixed up. They focus on the dangers of mob mentality, but they do it in such an unbelievable way that there's no real message put across there. As I said before, anyone who's anyone could see that that patient in that hospital was not Michael Myers. It's like chasing after Jason Voorhees and then killing Elvis Presley. There's just nothing similar whatsoever between the two characters, the way they walk, the way they run away. He wouldn't run away for a start, he'd be running towards him, as we see later on. So that just leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and which is already there from the continuous Evil Dies Tonight chanting.
Evil dies tonight!
Evil dies tonight!
All right, evil dies tonight! Evil dies tonight!
Which again was just said in the most dramatic, theatrical ways that wouldn't have been said, I don't think, in real life. Tommy Doyle, all grown up, I wasn't a fan of his portrayal. The badass amongst the townsfolk who's going to lead them, when really he didn't have much of a clue about what he was doing. I didn't feel anything from his character. And when you take away the vigilante mob, you've just got Michael strolling around town killing people. Unfortunately, Jamie Lee Curtis is vastly underused in this. Laurie is confined to her bed for the majority of the movie. So I don't really feel much from this movie. What I will say is it does have one of my absolute favourite scenes in the whole franchise, which is the opening scene where they recreate the standoff between Myers and the cops, and Samuel Loomis appearing in the form of, incredibly, construction foreman Tom Jones Jr., whose resemblance was enough to have him cast in this movie as recreating Donald Pleasance and recreating Dr. Loomis in those scenes. He sounds and looks like him. It's a beautiful throwback. You've got the old mask there as well. That was a really strong start for Halloween Kills. It's just a shame that I didn't feel as much for the rest of it. I will say Michael is badass in this movie. James Dew Courtney does a wonderful job of creating that vicious side to Michael, especially at the beginning with the fireman. And towards the end, if you can suspend disbelief and remember that Michael is driven by evil and it is harder to kill him, it is harder to damage him, then that scene is also quite satisfying. But other than that, Kills is pretty far down the list for me. In at number 8 is going to be the sequel from 1981, Halloween 2. I know that this is probably an unpopular decision because a lot of people really like the original sequel. There are some things that are good about this movie. I'm not going to say it's terrible or anything. It isn't right down the bottom of the list. I think the beginning is great. I think that feel of the Halloween night and the fact that they continue from the first film, it wasn't often that happened, where you got this immediate continuation from where the last one left off. I loved that. I thought it was great. It was fascinating to see how things developed directly following Michael disappearing from the foot of the balcony. I love the perspective shots. Even the score is slightly different. It divides opinion in popularity, but I think it's a nice fresh take on the first one. Might be a little overused at the beginning, but still following Michael around with that playing in the background, the taking the knife out of the kitchen, standing behind the woman in the house, all real classic Halloween shots. Where this film falls off for me is it kind of becomes detached when it gets to the hospital. I'm not a big fan of that hospital setting for Halloween. I think in general it can be very scary. In some instances it's quite creepy and it creates a bit of tension, but it's the fact that the whole movie more or less is in this hospital, and I don't feel it. And again, Laurie Strode is confined to that hospital looking very weak for the majority of it. There are certain scenes that I think lets it down a little. I think the Ben Tramer thing, as I've mentioned before, is ridiculous. You know, if he was drunk and you see a bunch of cops pointing guns at you and chasing at you, you do not walk in the opposite direction. You would stand and put your hands up, you know, for him to do that and run away from them and then get wiped out, which does look very impressive, I will say. I just thought that was a very, very silly part of the movie that didn't need to be there. And I think a lot of where Halloween 2 suffers is the necessity of it. I'm split here because further down the line you will see one of my favourites that kind of needs this one. Actually, I take that back. It doesn't need this one. I'll discuss that later. I don't understand how, if they were going to look at making an anthology out of Halloween, and we'll discuss 3 further on, why this sequel was necessary. Why the first story wasn't enough, and then we'll move on to something different. I don't really understand that. I also cannot get past Laurie shooting Michael in the eyes. The effect is fantastic. The blood running down the mask has made for some wonderful merchandise in the last few years, but he's blind then. Anything he does from then on forward, he surely cannot get about. He surely cannot kill people. He surely cannot be a force if he's been blinded. So I've never been a fan of that scene. And overall, I would probably be happy if this one didn't exist. This is going to feel like a contradictory entry if you've watched my tier list video, but I'm going to explain why. Coming in at number 7 is going to be Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. On my tier list, this was right up at the top. And the reason I'm putting it into the rankings at number 7 is because I look at the rankings in terms of Michael Myers' story. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch to me is an absolutely fabulous horror film on its own. Standalone, it is brilliant. But in terms of liking it in this franchise, I like so many others more. It's always one I watch every Halloween. I love the Silver Shamrock jingle. I can't get it out of my head, and it's quite creepy as well. So, you know, having that kind of ominous thing in your head throughout Halloween is all what Halloween is about.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
Tom Atkins is fantastic, say no more. And some of the practical effects are fantastic in this movie as well. I think it's a really nice 80s horror movie, and it's an absolute essential view for this time of year. The only reason it is this low is because I rank my Halloween movies in order based around how much it fits in with the story and how much I enjoy it as part of the story. And because Halloween 3 is so separate, I kind of stick this one on its own. But if I have to rank it anywhere, I'll put it in this place because the ones below it I don't enjoy. The ones above it I really enjoy. So I think that makes sense. It's pretty much smack bang in the middle. If this had been called Season of the Witch and had nothing to do with Halloween, I think people would enjoy it a lot more. I think this one is either loved or hated, but on its own, I think it has so much merit. Right, so at this point, we're getting into the ones that I am more fond of. Now, some of you may think that I should have already mentioned some in the lower tier, but again, this is my opinion. It is just my opinion, and the best thing about being in the horror community, and movies in general really, but certainly in the horror community, we share so many different opinions, and there is love for everything. I know I said I absolutely hate the bottom entry in this, but I'm aware that people out there will love it. Each to their own, let's discuss it. Coming in at 6 is Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. I've changed my tune on this over time. In my tier list, I had it near the bottom. I had it, I think, second to bottom, actually. I take that back. I think this movie is a lot better than it is given credit for. I think it's aged well. I don't know what your opinion on this is, but I think that this movie has a lot to offer. I give this film a lot of credit for having to clean up the mess that 5 created. I think Daniel Farron did a wonderful job on this script of trying to explain what 5 forced on everybody at the end. There are parts of it I don't like. I don't like them killing Jamie Lloyd off, especially when Danielle Harris wasn't brought back for this, which is also disappointing. It seemed very unceremonious, a bit like Rachel in the previous one. I think it was a waste. But what we do get is Paul Rudd in a role which he puts everything into. I said previously that I think this was risky for him, considering he was being introduced at that time and people may have thought he was over theatric, over dramatic, but he gives it his all, and I mean, he's done pretty well since then.
Michael's work isn't done in Haddonfield.
I don't think the indecisive studio helped this movie. It does seem a little muddled, and the druids and the cult storyline is not for many. Depending on which cut you watch, obviously there's a producer's cut which some people prefer. I think either one is just as muddled as the other. I don't like the idea of Michael standing in a room with the candles around and being so close to people. The whole point of Michael Myers is that you get as far away from him as possible. You don't stand next to him while he calmly watches some ceremony taking place. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. But what this movie does give is a lovely Halloween vibe. There's some nice visuals at the start of the neighborhood and the leaves and the pumpkins. Great shot of Michael outside the window at night, which really scared me when I was a kid because we had a window very similar that looked out into the garden and you could switch the light on. I always thought he'd appear. And George P. Wilbur as Michael Myers is one of my favourite portrayals of all time. I think he is fantastic in this. He's bulked up. His mask is back to being excellent. One of the best in the franchise, I think. And the kills are gnarly and brutal without being over the top. I'm a big fan of this movie, more so each time I watch it. It is muddled, it is convoluted, but it is picking up the pieces of the previous ones and trying to make the best of it. Halloween 6 over time has become a much better movie for me. Maybe for you, I don't know, but it's a It's a solid number 6 in the list for me. Here's the controversy. I told you in my tier list it was high up, and it's 5 on the list for me. It's Halloween Ends. David Gordon Green's final chapter in his trilogy. This movie has probably divided opinion more than any other film I have ever seen before, and that goes across all genres. I'm going to say now, I understand why people don't like it. I get that people think that they don't see enough Michael. He looks weak. They don't like the introduction of Corey, the romance that goes on in it. I totally understand all of that. Here's my take though. They wanted to do something different. I think Halloween Kills was what I was hoping Halloween Ends wouldn't be, which is just tons and tons of murders and then this lengthy showdown between two old people. With all due respect, Michael and Laurie are old people at this point. And I didn't want to see this long, drawn-out fight between the pair of them. We saw that in another movie we're going to talk about that worked. It wouldn't have worked in this one. They sort of backed themselves into a corner, really, with Kills. So they try to introduce something different, but it's too late. And that's what I think has pissed so many people off. My take on Halloween Ends is that if they had introduced Corey Cunningham in 2018, or even in Kills, but I would have done it 2 films back, and drip fed him in. Small character in the first one, slightly bigger character in the second, and then boom, unleashed him at the end. I think this movie does a little better and has a better opinion surrounding it. As it happens, they bring in Corey and they ask the fans to immediately take to this character and follow him on his journey, and they're just not ready for it. That's how I see it. What I will say is Rowan Campbell does a great job. Very sinister character, did the Unhinged very well, and I was on board it. Like many others might not have been, I was on board this kid and seeing where he was going and what the hell was happening to him and how Michael was going to influence him. He's almost the new Michael. I agree with reviewers such as Cody Leach who say that it was devastatingly frustrating when Corey is killed at the end, or Corey kills himself at the end. It almost makes everything you've watched completely pointless. I can get on board that. What I will say about Halloween Ends though is it looks absolutely beautiful. It is produced stunningly. You get the lovely Halloween 3 nod at the beginning with the title sequences, the music used throughout. I like the idea of the town being so damaged off the back of everything that's gone on. I'm always a big fan of those kind of vast consequences. I think Jamie Lee is on big form in this one. I think she gives everything in this final role. I think it's maybe a little unusual that she just wants to live this happy, jovial life all of a sudden when the events of Halloween Kills in the finale took place. You'd think that that would make her worse. She would probably just want to disappear somewhere completely different. So I was a bit surprised by that, but I guess her narration throughout is trying to convince you otherwise. She just wants to be normal and she won't be pushed away. It's nice to see Nick Castle appear as well. Obviously Kills is the one you want to watch if you want to see throwback characters being reintroduced, although I don't think it was done quite as well as it should have been. But this movie does try something different. It tries to take you on a little journey that you haven't seen before. I just think they could have planted the seeds earlier and people would have liked this movie more. I love the gradual conclusion. I love certain scenes where Michael suddenly gets some of that strength back that he used to have, because it's almost seeing that weak Michael, you're almost rooting for him to have just one final go at this, and you shouldn't be thinking that. And I'm one that doesn't want to root for the killers in horrors, but in this one I just wanted him to show something. Maybe that's for my viewing experience, I don't know. I liked the conclusion. I liked the teasing that Laurie might end it all and then nah, she's not having any of this. She's going to end Michael once and for all.
Did you really think I'd kill myself?
And the final showdown, it is brief, but again, I'm going to say this again, the age of the characters, they can't be fighting for 3, 4, 5 scenes. This needed to be now or never, do or die. Go for it. It wasn't drawn out and it was satisfying to me. And I love actually 2 favourite bits I have in this movie. One is the look that Laurie gives Corey when she realises that there's something wrong in those eyes. I love that scene. And also right at the conclusion when Michael grabs her by the throat defiantly for the final time and she flashes back to all the misery he has caused her over the years. That's also one of my favourite scenes. I think it ends well. I like the lack of breathing in the house at the end and that peaceful conclusion which Laurie deserved. So yeah, I know people hate this movie and maybe on second watch they might not hate it as much if they actually want to watch it a second time. I'm good with Halloween Ends. I was happy with it the way it finished, and yeah, that's my controversial take. take. Please tell me what you think, if you agree with any of that. Okay, we're getting to the nitty gritty now. In at 4, 1998's Halloween H2O. This came off the back of the monumental success of Wes Craven's Scream. I don't think this one really divides opinion that much. I think this is usually quite high up in the rankings. I think there are obvious problems in this movie with the mask. There's no need for there to be that many masks being used, and there's absolutely no need to be CGI involved in one of them. Very frustrating decision. But other than that, this movie has so many positives. Jamie Lee Curtis is arguably at her best in this. This is a Laurie Strode that wants to move on, similar to Ends, but she cannot get it out of her head. She has not made any inner peace. And she is now a mother, and she is trying to follow a career and put everything behind her. Unfortunately, her trauma years before is being inflicted on her son, who's played by Josh Hartnett. It's a good cast. It's a really strong cast, and it's a cast of the time. That late 90s feel is oozing out of this movie. The only thing that really took it away from me as a big negative was the fact that there was just no Haddonfield involved for the majority of the movie. It was all in California and centered around the boarding school. That sort of puts it down the list a little bit for me. It has a really nice introduction with the pictures on the wall, the historical significance of Michael's reign of terror in the earlier movies. You've got Tom Kane of Star Wars and Harry Potter video game fame voicing Dr. Loomis and giving us that nostalgic feel as the camera pans across all the newspaper clippings. And John Ottman does a very good job of recreating the score. I know that sort of divides opinion in this movie, but I really like the way it kicks in particular at the end when Jamie's standing there with the axe and screams Michael and it hits. I love that part. Kills are good, imaginative, they're unique. I said in the first tier list that Will annoyed me with this line.
My brother killed my sister when she was 17.
Well, that's sucky.
That line still annoys me, but actually upon watching it again, he sort of irons it out over time and I'm okay with him, and it is a shame he actually gets picked off at the end. Again, the only real criticisms I said are the setting, and maybe it tries a little too hard to be like Scream, and I think maybe that's what it is. It takes me away from that classic Halloween feel, but other than that, I really like this movie, and it has an absolutely magnificent ending, which I like to think is the ending, certainly for that timeline anyway. I may do a video in the future on what timelines I prefer and how I rank those, but if we don't think of the shit that follows, Halloween H2O has the perfect conclusion. In at number 3, and I surprised myself with this one because I wasn't convinced that this would be so high up, but upon looking at it, it is, and that's Halloween 2018. The first of the David Gordon Green trilogy. When this came out, I didn't know what to expect. I was still smarting from Resurrection and Rob Zombie's attempts, so I was a little worried that this was going to go down a similar route. Obviously, I was excited to know that Jamie Lee Curtis was going to be back involved with this, so that was a good thing. And immediately when this movie opens, I feel good. I love the scene at the asylum when they show him the mask and they're screaming at him and then bang, the music hits and it starts and we get that great introduction, which is a throwback to the original.
Say something!
And the Halloween night that they lay out in front of us is so beautifully shot. It is reminiscent of the first, and it's reminiscent of the best parts of the original sequel in 81. Michael looks great. I think from this point I was quite happy that James Dew Courtney was going to be Michael for the trilogy. He moves in the right way, he is the right size, his kills are as cold and ruthless as the original Michael played by Nick Castle. I was happy when this movie started. It does have some flaws. I think the character of Sartain wasn't necessary. I don't know why that was pushed. I think they needed somebody to replace Loomis, but again, I look at the worst parts of Dr. Loomis in 5 and they are amplified in Sartain. He obviously ends up being an unsavory character, but I don't think he's done enough by the point that he exits the movie to leave any kind of impact for me. So I wouldn't say that that was a great thing about this film. Obviously, one of the arguments amongst Halloween fans and horror fans in general is the story that's created about Michael being the brother of Laurie Strode. That was created in the original sequel. Another reason why I found the original sequel to be quite unnecessary. That is thrown away in this, and we are left with night 1 through to now. And again, it's another kind of timeline. It might not be my favourite timeline. I kind of created my own, which I will go into on a later date. But it is great that Jamie Lee Curtis's character is back to just being that random babysitter that has the trauma from years ago. The only problem with that is you kind of wonder why she's held on to this 20 minutes of trauma for 40 years. Maybe it's her friends being killed and things like that. I just think that was slightly far-fetched. Maybe a little bit of a point shaver on this movie. But again, who are we to say what trauma does to somebody? And if it festers for that long and it doesn't leave you, maybe there's only one way to try and counteract it, and that is to face it head on. They take the basics in this movie and they do them beautifully well. There's a great ending, and obviously we knew this was going to be a trilogy, so they left you on an ending where you're going, how the hell's he going to get out of that? And obviously we find out how, which is a good way to end. When you're wondering, when you know something else is coming, I quite like that strong finish. It was my personal favourite of that trilogy. I could watch Halloween 2018 at any time. It's a lot of fun and one of the better reboots that I've ever seen. All right, we're down to the final two. I think this is going to be fairly obvious, but let's go into it anyway. Number 2 in this list, the penultimate entry on this ranking, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. I'll say it again, I make absolutely no apologies for loving the hell out of this movie. It is technically the first in the Thorn trilogy, but that is not mentioned in this movie whatsoever. So I can detach those two. To me, the Thorn movies are 5 and 6. It is not mentioned in this. So that's a good thing in itself. This movie feels like Halloween from the very moment it starts. The most wonderful, beautiful imagery I have seen in an introduction to a Halloween film in this franchise, and I get kind of a little shudder when I see it. I'm like, this is Halloween to me. This is October. This is the fall. This is everything I expect. And I like to try and tie this in with the first and try and ignore the second. I pretend that obviously Michael hasn't been shot in the eyes. Loomis is burnt from, I don't know, maybe he's fallen on a waffle iron or something. But I like to put 1 and then 4. So we'll talk about that at a later date. But right from the off, wonderful scene when Michael is making his way back to Haddonfield, and you have that fabulous look. Amy Horror's a big fan of this as well. She's not a massive fan of 4, but she loves the look of the bandages around the head, the bandage look of Michael, and that great zoom shot through the doorway when Loomis finally claps eyes on him. Unfortunately, you have to go with the brother angle if you want there to be a reason why Michael is coming for Jamie. She is introduced in this movie and she is fantastic. Again, I'll say Danielle Harris's performance is one of the best child performances in a horror film or in any film for that matter. And Loomis really hams it up in this. He looks like a traumatized, desperate man throughout, and it doesn't go too far. That's in 5. 4, he is exactly where he needs to be.
If you don't find him in 4 hours, I'm sure I will.
Trying to protect this little girl and trying to rid Haddonfield of this monster. The kills are very good in this. It features one of my favourite kills in the franchise, the shotgun through the gut. But what this movie does is admit that it probably didn't make the right decision in introducing us to Season of the Witch the way they did, so they went right back to what they knew. It is so endlessly rewatchable to me. And one of the things that is widely an issue in the Halloween community is the mask in this movie. And I'm going to give my take on this as I did on the tier list. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen to the same words, but I'll just enhance it a little. My take on the mask in Halloween 4 is that Michael is arriving back in Haddonfield and he visits the store with all the Halloween costumes, and for some twisted reason Haddonfield think it's a good idea to sell the mask of a man that terrorized the town only a few years previous. This isn't a lore or a myth or a legend. This literally happened. They are selling the mask of a town killer that murdered people a few years before. So I don't know why they think that's a good idea, but nevertheless they are. Michael picks up a cheap knockoff version of his mask that they're selling, and that's what he uses. The only thing that I can say is probably a mistake, and this is where Kills got it right, is I don't think he should have had that mask on in Jamie's dream sequence. I had that mentioned to me by my friend Sean at Grimfest, that dream sequence shouldn't have had that new mask. It should have been the old one, because it's like a flashback or a deep set fear that's in her head because she has some sort of connection to him. So maybe it shouldn't have been used in that scene, and we absolutely should not have had that god-awful pink mask with the blonde hair in the one scene. That's a really amateur mistake to make. So that's a bit inexcusable. But the actual mask that he has throughout the movie is pulled out of a Halloween store. It's all he has. He wouldn't have the original mask. There'd be no reason for him to have that one. And especially if this movie is going off that it's some sort of direct sequel to 2, then that mask would have been burnt up, and obviously there would have been blood all over the eyes as well. So I'm okay with the mask. The shoulder pads, maybe not so. If that's the biggest problem in this movie, to everybody, I'm okay with that, because I think the rest of it is glorious. I will love Halloween 4 for as long as I'm on this earth. And it's the crown jewel, number 1, 1978's Halloween by John Carpenter. There aren't many people that don't put this at number 1. It started it all. It is so influential. I'm a big fan of less is more. I always have been. I like subtlety. I use that word more than any other word on this channel. Halloween, the original Halloween, gave us what we needed. The simplicity of this movie is genius. The simplicity of his story is absolutely paramount. A kid who has no reason to be evil. He has a good upbringing. He lives in a nice neighborhood, and for some reason he has an evil inside him that makes him kill his sister. And from then on, it's about making sure that they keep that guy the away from Haddonfield, so that that town can continue to be a beautiful neighborhood, a friendly neighborhood. He is essentially the only evil in that town. You cannot understate just how important Donald Pleasence is in this movie. His voice, his ability to convey desperation. And one of the things that I love about this movie, and actually what I love about the 4th installment, he is not looked at as being crazy, and they don't just dismiss his warnings and his threats.
The blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
Because that can be so frustrating in movies when you know damn well this guy's right but everyone else is just playing dumb. You believe every word that Donald Pleasence says in this movie, and you believe every situation that these people are in. They are oblivious. And one of the great things about this movie is most of these people are only aware of Michael in the last 10 minutes of this movie. For the rest of it, there's no warnings, there's no triggers, there's no people hiding in attics or hiding in bedrooms and locking the doors. They don't know he's there. And it is just a pure display of how to make a good, solid, frightening horror movie. Some of my favourite scenes are in this movie. There are so many, but I'll pick one out I absolutely found to be chilling, and that is when Laurie is looking out of the bedroom window and she sees Michael amongst the sheets on the line, and it's not so much the image of Michael but the reaction of Laurie, the sheer fear. It's like the lump in the throat. You can almost see it happen, and then it cuts away and she looks so alone and isolated in her own home. It is absolutely beautifully shot. That's my favourite scene in this whole movie. It's the one that really made the hair stand up on my arms. It's massively quotable, but not in a silly way.
He was doing very well last night.
It gives you absolutely minimal glimpses of Michael Myers throughout until the conclusion, and even then he's in the shadows, he's in the dark, he is the shape. And I'm not one for statistics, but the figures don't lie. If you've made a movie that is around the region of 300,000 and it makes 70 million at the box office, you've probably done something right there. They wanted to make a movie that had the same impact as The Exorcist. I think it absolutely did, and it has spawned so much off the back of it. We would not have Jason Voorhees, we would not have Freddy Krueger without this movie. It brought terror to neighborhoods, into the home, and to me it's one of the most important movies ever made, one of the best movies ever made, and it has its own penthouse suite at the top of this rankings list. That's it. That's my 13 ranked Halloween movies from 78 to 23, all 13 of them. Tell me what you think. Is your list different to mine? I'm pretty sure it's going to be. Is there something you absolutely disagree with, or is there something you went, thank God somebody said that, because I've been thinking that all along and didn't want to say it because of the backlash? We're all horror fans. We all want the same thing. We just want to be scared, entertained. We want to laugh. We want the thrill and the ride of a horror. And we all have our varying tastes. If you like Resurrection, I'll still talk to you. I will invite any comments for anybody that likes Resurrection, wants to give me some reasons why they like it. I'm fascinated by that. If you enjoyed this video, as well as putting those comments underneath, please like this video, hit that like button, give me some love for a lot of hard work today. And please, if you can share this channel about, tell your friends, say there's a guy out there that really likes Halloween Ends. I will happily stand there and take your conflicting opinion. Drop a subscribe, hit that notification bell for any future updates on videos that I'll be posting, and thank you all for your support on Primetime Mitch. Happy Halloween, guys. I'll see you sometime soon.